Hi guys, welcome to our second video on this module of how to write a thesis. Alright, so just to review our previous lesson a little bit, your thesis should be short, clear, and direct. Around 2 to 3 sentences is good, just try not to write more than that. You already have a lot to write. And your thesis should address the who, what, when, where, and why or how of the issue. All right, so let's take a look at this little color coding that I made for you guys. So we're back with our prompt about American independence and how the ideas of that changed from 1763 to 1783. So the good examples from the previous video, I've just color coded them so that it's easier for you to see like how these criteria, these who, what, when, where, and why are included in the thesis. Let's take a look at the second example, and I'll go through it with you, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So, from 1763 to 1783, okay, that's obviously the when and where part. Colonial ideas about American independence, okay, that is definitely where, but it's also about who and what. And then, did not change much. Okay, that is what we're really trying to say. That is like our main point, our main argument. It didn't really change. And then finally, following our main point, the why and how, which is because throughout the period, many colonists continued to oppose the Patriot cause. See how it's really simple. It's just one sentence, but it covers everything. So basically, looking at this, you should conclude that your thesis is a specific summary of what you're trying to mainly argue, and adding these who, what, when, where, and why, how makes it really clear what your position is specifically. My tip for practicing a thesis and making sure you get all of these in is to go to College Board and look at all the good scoring FRQs, DBQs, or SAQs, or whatever that other students have previously wrote, because as you may know, College Board always puts exemplary student works on their website for all of us to look at and observe. And color coding them or just coding them so that you can note whether or not the student used the who, what, when, where, and why, how in their thesis is really important, and it helps a lot if you're still not really used to writing a thesis. I really recommend it. All right, so with the review done about the basics and fundamentals of a thesis, for today's lesson, prepared a little formula for writing a thesis. You know, my last and final tip for making a great thesis is just to memorize a formula for it if you're not comfortable yet with freehand writing a thesis on the spot. And trust me, I understand it. I've been there, but trust me, you'll get there when you take AP Seminar or AP Lang or AP Lit or whatever. But for now, you can memorize this thesis making formula here and stick with it until you feel comfortable and you get the hang of writing a good thesis. So it says over here, although X, A and B, therefore Y. So X would be your counter argument, A and B is your evidence, and Y is your main argument. All right, you can skip this part if you know what a counter argument is, but I would still suggest to stick around and listen to my explanation of it. So, what is a counter argument? Basically, you're addressing a potential disagreement with your argument or to your argument. So let's go back to our curfew example. Your parents could say that I don't care if you're 17, you're still a minor and you're way too young to be outside until 9 or 10 p.m. Okay, fair enough. But here's the thing. First addressing that point that your parents just made, that counter argument, and then introducing your main argument makes your argument even stronger. Because by addressing a counter argument, you're basically saying, hey, I know this is a potential flaw to my argument, but that being said, because of X and Y, here's why my argument is still better. A good argument always addresses a counter argument, so just remember that. All right, pause if you need to take notes, but now we will move on to looking at good examples of thesis statements. Let's first look at our curfew example that I've prepared on the spot here, and I've color-coded again so that it's easier for you to understand. So you could say to your parents' previous counter argument that although from your perspective as parents, having a curfew set at 7 p.m. is a reasonable and safe time for me to come back home, X, your counter argument, your reasoning could be, I am 17 years old now, A, and I can take care of myself, B. Therefore, I should be allowed to extend my curfew from That should say 7 p.m. But anyways, therefore, I should be allowed to extend my curfew from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pause if you need to take it all in and understand what's going on, because now we're going to move on to a good example of a history-related one. All right, so we're back with our good old American independence prompt, and this is something that I just wrote on the spot quickly. Although most colonists identified at the beginning of American Revolution as a part of the British and only sought representation, the continued contention over economic policies and political dictatorship drove many colonists to search for a new identity as an independent America. See how I'm very specific with my thesis, but I'm also addressing a lot of different perspectives and different points to my argument, which makes what I'm trying to say even stronger and clearer. I'm saying that despite the fact that a lot of American people during the Revolution did still identify as British, and they, well, still only sought for representation during the Revolution, because of the British economic policies that many American or colonists at the time thought was unfair, and because of the political dictatorship from the British monarchy, it drove many colonists to search for new identity as an independent America, meaning that they no longer identified as British. And that's when the American independence and revolution really started to happen. Pause if you need to take notes and take in what I just said. But this is basically a good example of how to use that formula that I introduced you before. Now, that being said, your thesis could obviously be a little bit simpler than that in terms of like verbiage or wording, but in terms of the structure and all the necessary components to a strong thesis, this really nails it. Again, this not only addresses the counter argument and specifically states evidence and what you want to really say as your main argument, but it also addresses multiple perspectives. It addresses the British, and it addresses the colonists and what they were initially thinking and what they thought that led to a change in the idea of American independence. All right, so I hope this makes writing a thesis way clearer for you. I would suggest to practice and getting used to writing this until you go watch the next video on this module about how to do contextualization. So watch that video when you're ready, and I'll see you around.